रिबन है ना।
Chapter 3. Yes, Bhagwan, at 17th sloka. Yes.
What is the chapter called?
Liberation from the illusory energy. Text 17. Translation. King Nimi said, O great sage, please explain how even a foolish materialistic can easily cross over the illusory energy of the Supreme Lord, which is always insurmountable for those who are not self-controlled. Purpose. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, Sthula Dhiya indicates those who ignorantly identify themselves with the gross material body and who are therefore unable to analyze the subtle laws of nature by which the soul transmigrates into illusion. Srila Jiva Goswami comments that Sthula Dhiya also indicates so-called pious person who execute pompous religious ceremonies for material sense gratification rather than trying to prepare themselves to go back home back to Godhead by engaging in the loving devotional service of the Lord. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, King Nimi was already an advanced devotee of the Lord. Therefore, that one can cross over the illusory energy Maya by surrendering to the lotus feet of the Lord and pleasing Him by pure devotional service. Therefore, the king was asking the question for the benefit of those who falsely consider themselves very much learned but in fact are addicted to materialistic fruitive activities, which increasingly entangle them in illusion. In this regard, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has quoted from Amar Kosh dictionary to show that Akritam Bhi indicates Apurnatava or one whose life is empty. Every living being has an eternal relationship with the Supreme Living Being Krishna. One may love Krishna by thinking of him as one's eternal master, as one's most intimate friend, one's beloved child, or the object of one's conjugal attraction. Of course, such ecstasies should never be confused with ordinary material emotions, which are perverted reflection of spiritual rasas or relationships. In the material world, we try to release these same relationships of servitude, friendship, parental love, and conjugal love, but the object of such feeling is a temporary material body which is quickly devastated by the laws of nature. Those loving feelings should be directed towards the spiritual body of the Supreme Personality Krishna, who is the reservoir of all beauty and transcendental bliss. One who has not learned the art of directing his love to Krishna is Apurna, or one whose life is ultimately empty. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakura, one whose life is empty can also be called Madadhi, or one whose intelligence is crippled by a lack of broad experience. King Nimi, a pure Vaishnava, was so kind that he asked how can such cripple-minded people cross over Maya in the easiest way possible, since by nature they are very lazy in spiritual matters. Text 18. Sri Prabuddha said, accepting the roles of male and female in human society, the conditioned souls unite in sexual relationships. Thus, they constantly make material endeavors to eliminate their unhappiness and unlimitedly increase their pleasure. But one should see that they inevitably achieve exactly the opposite result. In other words, their happiness inevitably vanishes and they grow older, their material discomfort increases. Purport. Without the mercy of a pure devotee, it is exceedingly difficult to free oneself from the bodily conception of life, which is illusory basis of sexual attraction. Text 19. Translation. Wealth is a perpetual source of distress. It is most difficult to acquire and it is virtual death for the soul. What satisfaction does one actually gain from his wealth? Similarly, how one gain ultimate or permanent happiness from one's so-called home, children, relatives, and domestic animals, which are all maintained by one's hard-earned money? Text 20. Translation. One cannot find permanent happiness even on the heavenly planets, which one can attain in the next life by ritualistic ceremonies and sacrifices. Even in material heaven, the living entity is disturbed by rivalry with his equals and envy of those superior to him. And since one's residence in heaven is finished with the exhaustion of pious fruitive activities, the denizens of heaven are afflicted by fear, anticipating the destruction of their heavenly life. Thus, they resemble kings who, though enviously admired by ordinary citizens, are constantly harassed by enemy kings, and who therefore never attain actual happiness. Purport. Srila Sridhar Swami has quoted the following text from the Chandogya Upanishad 8.1.6. Tad yatheha karma chitto loka siyate evam evam punya chitto loka siyante. One's present status of material pleasure, the result of one's previous work, will eventually be vanquished by time. Similarly, although by executing pious activities one will be elevated to a higher status in life, that future situation will also be vanquished. The basis of material enjoyment is the particular body one has acquired. The material body is karma chitta, the accumulated results of one's previous material activities. If one is awarded a body decorated with beauty, education, popularity, strength, and so on, his standard of material enjoyment is certainly high class. On the other hand, if one is ugly, mentally retarded, crippled, or repulsive to others, there is very little hope for his material happiness. In both cases, however, the situation is flickering and temporary. One who has acquired an attractive body should not rejoice, since death will quickly bring an end to such an intoxicating situation. Similarly, one who has taken birth in an obnoxious situation should not lament, since his suffering is also temporary. The beautiful man and the ugly man, the rich man and the poor, the educated and the foolish, should all endeavor to become Krishna conscious so that they can be elevated to their eternal constitutional situation, which is to reside in the planets beyond this material universe. Originally, every living entity is unimaginably beautiful, intelligent, wealthy, and so strong that his spiritual body lives forever. But we foolishly give up this eternal blissful situation because we are unwilling to meet the condition for eternal life. The condition is that one should be a lover of the Supreme Personality of Krishna. Although love of Krishna is the most exquisite ecstasy, surpassing by millions of times the most intense pleasure of the material universe, we foolishly break off our loving affair with the Supreme Lord and artificially try to become independent enjoyers in the material atmosphere of self-delusion and false pride. Even if one reaches the exalted heavenly planets of this universe, he will be afflicted by various types of suffering. Every conditioned soul in the material world wants to become the greatest person. Therefore, one who is constantly harassed by his equals who have a similar desire. This situation is commonly termed as the rat race of material existence. Even on the heavenly planets, there is a similar rat race for heavenly distinction. Since some person inevitably excel our own achievements, our hearts burn with envy upon seeing others enjoying the very rewards we have strived for. And because our whole situation is temporary, we must undergo fear, anxiety, death, even on the heavenly planets. The example given here is very nice. Minor king may be enviously admired by ordinary citizens for their wealth, power, and fame, but such kings themselves constantly burn with jealousy, resentment, and fear due to rivalry and threats from other kings. Similarly, modern politicians are constantly harassed by envy and fear. Srila Bhakti Siddhant Saraswati Thakur has pointed out that the conditioned souls, being eager to acquire material happiness and avoid distress, take shelter of sexual relationships and thus surrender to the hard labor of fruitive activities. Those who are enlightened, however, can perceive the ultimate futility of such gross materialistic endeavor. One's so-called wife, home, children, relatives, bank account, and so on are all temporary phantasmagoria, and even while manifest, they can never give real satisfaction to one's senses. To acquire wealth in this world, one is practically forced to become the killer of his own soul. There is no possibility of acquiring pleasure from materialistic activities since they are performed with temporary senses and in the hot pursuit of temporary sense objects. When the conditioned soul achieves his goal, he becomes proud and brags to others as if his achievements were permanent. And when defeated, he is submerged in lamentation. Such a tendency to consider oneself the doer is a sign of weak intelligence, since in fact the living entity is merely residing within the material body. The body itself is moved by the force of material nature under the control of God. The relationship of master and servant, father and son, husband and wife entail exchanges of well-wishing and service that give a sense of material gratification. But such ephemeral devotion can never bring about the eternal absolute benefit of the soul. By such temporary gratification, Maya induces the conditioned soul to wander throughout the material world, pursuing the relative rewards of material nature. According to the subtle laws of karma, the living entity achieves happiness and distress. One cannot obtain happiness by force, no matter how strenuously or how long one tries. Therefore, those whose intelligence is uncontaminated should surrender at the lotus feet of Krishna and give up the ludicrous pursuit of permanent material happiness, a pursuit which can be compared to a dog's chasing his tail. Text 21, translation. Therefore, any person who seriously desires real happiness must seek a bona fide spiritual master and take shelter of him by initiation. The qualification of the bona fide guru is that he has realized the conclusion of the scriptures by deliberation and is able to convince others of these conclusions. Such great personalities who have taken shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, leaving aside all material considerations, should be understood to be bona fide spiritual masters. Purport. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, the word Savde refers to the Vedic literature and Pare refers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The bona fide spiritual master must be Nisnatam, deeply experienced in authorized Vedic literatures and in practical understanding of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Without scriptural knowledge and practical realization of the personality of Godhead, a so-called guru will be unable to dissipate the doubts of his disciples and therefore unable to execute the function of bringing the sincere student back home, back to Godhead. The symptom of realized understanding of the Vedas and Krishna is Pasmasrayam. In other words, the bona fide spiritual master is one who has retired from the glittering illusions of material society, friendship, and love. Within the material world, one is certainly attracted to becoming a great intellectual, a powerful politician, the loving father of many beautiful and affectionate little children, a most honored welfare worker, or a highly admired and successful businessman. But none of these material positions have a permanent basis, nor do they afford permanent happiness, because they are all based on primary misunderstanding by which one identifies himself with the material body. Anyone can readily experience that he is not the body by but consciousness. Even if one loses a limb of his body, he does not cease to exist as a conscious entity. Ultimately, the entire body is lost at the time of death. The living entity acquires a new body. Preliminary understanding of one's identity as consciousness is called self-realization. But beyond this elementary knowledge is the elaborate subject matter of how the soul came into exist within the cycle of 84 lakh material species of life. Even if the living entity is not the material body but consciousness, he must ultimately have an original status on a higher platform. Punishment implies reward also. A powerful man who can punish is also able to reward. Therefore, the existence of punishment for the living being who is forced to take a miserable material body subject to birth, old age, disease and death also logically implies the existence of a reward for him. Although we mistakenly consider material sense gratification the ultimate reward of life, material happiness is actually another type of punishment, since it entices one to continue rotating in the cycle of birth and death. In the Western countries, violent prisoners are placed in solitary confinement, whereas well-behaved prisoners are sometimes allowed to work in the warden's garden or library as a reward. But any position in prison is ultimately a punishment. Similarly, the existence of higher and lower categories of material sense gratification does not explain the living entity's ultimate reward, which must constitute the natural antithesis of the punishment. Next slope 22. Translation. Accepting the bona fide spiritual master as one's life and soul and worshipable deity, the disciples should learn from him the process of pure devotional service. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, the soul of all souls, is inclined to give himself to his pure devotees. Therefore, the disciples should learn from the spiritual master to serve the Lord without duplicity and in such a faithful and favorable way that the Supreme Lord, being satisfied, will offer himself to the faithful disciple. Purport. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, the Lord's tendency to give himself to his pure devotee is demonstrated in the case of Bali Maharaj, who sacrificed his universal kingdom for the pleasure of Lord Vamanadeva. Lord Vaman was so pleased by the selfless surrender of Bali Maharaj that the Lord became the doorman in the palace of Bali, who was reinstalled as a great leader in the universe. Srila Jiva Goswami comments that the spiritual master is to be considered the Atma, or the very life of the disciple. Since real life begins when one is initiated by a bona fide spiritual master, although one may experience many seemingly wonderful or important events in a dream, one's real life begins when he wakes up. Similarly, since the spiritual master gives birth to the disciple by awakening him to spiritual life, a bona fide disciple understands that his spiritual master is the very basis of his life. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the reservoir of all pleasure. And thus, the Lord's giving himself to a pure devotee indicates that such a devotee becomes immersed in the highest possible ecstasy. In this connection, there is the following Shruti mantra: Anandad Dhimani Bhutani Jayante. Indeed, it is from the all blissful Supreme that all these creatures have come into being. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has further pointed out that when the Lord bestows his own self upon a pure devotee, such a fortunate devotee can actually see the Lord, touch him, and directly engage in his service. According to Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, one should never consider one's spiritual master to be mundane or an equal level with oneself. One should see the spiritual master as being always under the shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. One should never try to engage the spiritual master in one's personal service with the mentality of lording it over the spiritual master and attaining through him some material gain. One who is actually advancing will become more and more eager to serve the spiritual master, and thus such a disciple experience the pleasure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Srila Rupa Goswami has delineated four preliminary requisites for advancement for the sincere disciple. Guru Padashrayas Tasmat Krishna Dikshadi Siksanam Visrma Bhena Guru Seva Sadhu Vartamanu Vartanam. Accepting the shelter of the lotus feet of the bona fide spiritual master. Second, becoming initiated by the spiritual master and learning how to discharge devotional service from him. Third, obeying the order of the spiritual master with faith and devotion. And fourth, following in the footsteps of great acharyas under the direction of the spiritual master. Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1.2.74. One who has executed these preliminary duties is qualified to release Srimad Bhagavatam. When one actually hears the sound vibration of Srimad Bhagavatam as it is, he becomes free from the desire for sense gratification and mental speculation and is happy and satisfied in the service of Lord Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam 177. Simply by giving oral reception to Srimad Bhagavatam, the feeling for loving devotional service to the Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, sprouts up at once to extinguish the fire of lamentation, illusion, and fearfulness. One should hear Srimad Bhagavatam from a bona fide spiritual master who can expertly engage the propensity for loving Krishna that arises from hearing the transcendental sound of the Bhagavatam. Such a transcendental authorized engagement is called Bhagavat Dharma. Within the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, there are many thousands of authorized engagements pertaining to the society's missionary activities, and by hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam and performing such engagements, the society's members feel relief from Soka, Moha, and Bhaya. According to Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, those who have achieved a mature understanding of the transcendental sound vibration of Srimad Bhagavatam may adopt the order of Tridandi Sannyas as described in Hamsa Gita, the 13th chapter of this canto. A so-called Vaishnava who whimsically neglects the strict control of body, mind and speech cannot actually achieve shelter at the lotus feet of a bona fide spiritual master. Even if such a whimsical sense enjoyer makes us show off, assuming the dress of Danda or Vaishnav sannyas, he will not attain the desired result, love of Krishna. A bona fide Vaishnav should work earnestly to free himself from any tinge of sense gratification and mental speculation, and with a loving heart he should carry out the order of his bona fide spiritual master. By always remembering the exalted position of the bona fide spiritual master, the disciple will achieve shelter at the lotus feet of Krishna. Text 23. Translation. A sincere disciple should learn to disassociate the mind from everything material and positively cultivate the association with his spiritual master and other saintly devotees. He should be merciful to those in an inferior position to him, cultivate friendship with those on an equal level, and meekly serve those in a higher spiritual position. Thus, he should learn to deal properly with all living beings. Purport. Srila Madhvacharya has quoted from the Garud Puran to demonstrate that within this universe, those who have take birth as demigods, great rishis or pious human beings are all considered santa or saintly persons. According to Bhagavad Gita, Traygunya Visaya Veda, the Varnashram culture described in Vedic literature deals mostly with the living entities who are struggling within the three modes of nature. The Vedic literatures teach such conditioned souls that material happiness can be achieved only through pious works. In this sense, the demigods are to be considered the most pious living entities within the three modes of material nature. The rishis or the great saintly mystics of the universe who are able to travel at will to various planets and who cultivate mystic powers are to be considered somewhat below the demigods. And those human beings on earth who perfectly execute the Vedic rituals are to be considered in the third or lowest category of Santa or saintly persons. But a devotee of the Lord is beyond the three modes of material nature. Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 14.26, Mam chayo avicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samtiyetan brahma bhujaya kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall down in any circumstance, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. Thus, Lord Krishna clearly says that a Vaishnava who does not fall down from the regulations of Bhakti Yoga is beyond the three modes of nature. And Lord Krishna advises Arjuna, a Krishna Bhakta, to transcend the three material qualities of the illusory creation of Maya. But in the 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says, there is no being existence either here or among the demigods in the higher planetary system who is free from the three modes of material nature. Thus, the demigods are not exempt from the pollution of the three modes of material nature, whereas a pure devotee actually becomes gunatit or transcendental to the influence of Maya. Therefore, one should cultivate the association of Uttamadhikari or pure devotee of the Lord as stated previously, Srimad Bhagavatam 11.3.21. Therefore, any person who seriously desires real happiness must seek a bona fide spiritual master, take shelter of him by initiation. The qualification of bona fide guru is that he has realized the conclusions of the scriptures by deliberation and is able to convince others of these conclusions. Such great personalities who have taken shelter of Supreme Personality of Godhead, leaving aside all material consideration, should be understood to be bona fide spiritual masters. On the other hand, one should avoid the association of a materialistic person, even if such a person is outwardly chanting the holy name of Krishna, Srila Rup Goswami has advised in this respect. One may mentally offer respect to any living entity who is chanting the holy name of Krishna, but one should avoid intimate association with materialistic persons, especially those attached to sex enjoyment. Tamo dwaram yositam sangi sangam. If one associates with a sensuous person who is attached to the company of women, by such association one will surely go to hell. But if a materialistic person approaches a pure devotee with a sincere desire to hear from him about spiritual improvement, the first class devotee may mercifully give him association, provided the purpose of such a meeting is advancement in the devotional service of Krishna. By such association, even a materialistic person can gradually become a pure devotee of Krishna. If an advanced devotee is not able to engage a materialistic person in devotional service of the Krishna, such association is strictly forbidden. In Garuda Puran, it is stated, one cannot be liberated without association with a pure devotee of the Lord. And unless one shows mercy to those in an inferior position, one's life will be superficial. It is our practical experience in Krishna consciousness movement that those who are expanding their mercy by preaching the message of Krishna are making rapid spiritual progress and their life is filled with transcendental bliss. Those who neglect the quality of mercy, being uninterested in the missionary activity of the Krishna consciousness movement, are not filled with transcendental pleasure as described here by the word Puriyate. Not being filled with spiritual pleasure, surely such persons attempt to fill their lives with material pleasures through sense gratification and mental speculation, associating with women or reading innumerable mundane novels, newspapers, news magazines, and so on. According to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the preaching activity of Krishna consciousness movement are Anandam Buddhi Vardhanam, the ever increasing ocean of bliss. Missionary activities are based on the principles of Dayam or mercy to those who are fallen. Those who are actually preaching become enlivened by associating with other preachers. The principle is called Maitrim or friendship among equals. The power to carry out such preaching activities as well as the proper guidance for distributing Krishna's message comes through the principle of prasrayam or humble service at the lotus feet of spiritual authorities such as the spiritual master. If one preaches Krishna consciousness sincerely under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master in the company of fellow preachers, one is perfectly fulfilling the statement of this verse of Srimad Bhagavatam. Thus he will come to the point of Sarvato Manaso Sangam or complete detachment from the illusory energy of the Lord. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has stated, Lava Matra Sadhu Sang Sarva Siddhi Hoy. By becoming attached to the devotee of the Lord, one will achieve all perfection in life, going back home, back to Godhead. If one neglects the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead by engaging in sinful life, he is certainly not merciful. One who ignores his eternal status as part and parcel of the Supreme Lord and instead cover himself more and more with material illusions in the form of temporary designations, I am American, I am Russian, I am Indian, I am black, I am white, and so on, is certainly a killer of his own soul and cannot be considered merciful. Similarly, those who support animal slaughter by eating meat, fish, and eggs cannot be considered merciful. Sometimes the argument is given that if one does not harm others, he is perfectly religious. But because we are now in a state of ignorance, we have no idea whatsoever of the future reactions to our present activities. Ignorantly boasting that one is not harming others without an awareness of the subtle laws of nature does not make one a religious person. One becomes religious by surrendering to the laws of God as they are stated by the Lord Himself in Bhagavad Gita. As long as a living entity is infatuated with his own mental speculations which carry him away like the waves of the ocean, he cannot understand the process of devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Mental speculations based on our experience of variegated creations of the Lord's illusory energy are incapable of bringing us to perfect knowledge. One must give up materialistic association and make company with pure devotee of the Lord, those who are engaged 24 hours a day in perfectly pleasing the Supreme Lord. One should cultivate the association with those who are more advanced than oneself in devotional service. One's advancement can be measured by one's detachment for sense gratification and his ability to distribute Krishna consciousness to others. In this connection, Srila Lingottam Das Thakur has said, Charya Vaishnava Seva Nispar Payechi Keva. Who can attain salvation if he gives up the service of the Vaishnavas? By serving the lotus feet of pure devotees, one is immediately enlightened with spiritual knowledge. All of the so-called pleasures of the material world, culminating in varieties of sexual fantasy and impersonal vision of oneself as God, become useless to one who has achieved the mercy of the lotus feet of a pure devotee of Krishna. The entire material creation is compared to an insignificant bubble in the ocean. The material universe rests on the spiritual potency of the Lord, called Brahma Jyoti, just as an insignificant bubble rests on the potency of the unlimited ocean. By serving the lotus feet of a pure devotee, one can enter the ocean of eternal happiness and experience his constitutional position as a servant of Krishna. The mercy of Vaishnavas is unlimited, and one who has tasted that mercy becomes mad after the lotus feet of Krishna, not caring for the hallucinations of so-called material pleasure or mental speculations. The mercy of the Vaishnavas is substantial and as powerful as Krishna himself, whereas impersonal speculation and hopeless dreams of society, friendship and love merely constitute various means by which Maya cheats the conditioned souls and keeps them in perpetual frustration. Text 24. Translation. To serve the spiritual master, the disciples should learn cleanliness, austerity, tolerance, silence, study of Vedic literature, simplicity, celibacy, non-violence, and equanimity in the face of material dualities such as heat and cold, happiness and distress. Purport. Saucham or cleanliness refers to both internal and external purity. One should remain externally clean by bathing with soap and water at least once and if possible 3 times daily. One is considered internally pure when he is freed from the pollution of false pride and egotism. Tapah, austerity means that despite the irrational impulses of the mind, one should remain fixed in executing his proper duty in life. Especially one must control burning anger and the urge for wanton sex life. If a human being does not control the impulses of lust, anger and greed, he loses his power to understand his actual situation. Human life is a golden opportunity to solve the overwhelming problems of birth, death, old age and disease. According to Vishnu Puran 3.8.9, every human being can achieve spiritual perfection by dedicating the fruits of his prescribed work to the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu. Similarly, in Bhagavad Gita 18.4.5, Lord Krishna clearly states, Swe Swe Karmani Abhirata Sham Siddhi Labhate Nara. One should not have to adopt a monastic life or live in the forest as a yogi. One can achieve perfection by dedicating his occupational duties to the Supreme Lord. Similarly, Bhakti Vinod Thakur has said, Namashraya Kari Jatane Tumi Thakaho Apana Kaje. If one sincerely takes shelter of the holy name of Krishna by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, he will achieve spiritual perfection within the compass of his normal daily activities. Unfortunately, if a human being neglects the regulative principles of civilized life that prohibit illicit sex, meat eating, intoxication, and gambling, he will surely be overwhelmed by the waves of lust and anger, which completely cover one's consciousness of the reality of spiritual life and draw one to engage in the phantasmagoria of the temporary material body, as Lord Krishna has stated in Bhagavad Gita 3.39. Avritam jnanam etena jnanino nityavairina kam rupena kaunteya duspurena analena cha. Thus, a man's pure consciousness is covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and which burns like fire. Therefore, the word tapah or austerity in this verse indicates that one must remain in his prescribed duty and should not become impatient or unregulated due to the waves of lust, anger, and greed. The word titiksam or tolerance indicates that a transcendentalist must be forgiving. The material world is full of embarrassing and irritating situations, and unless one is inclined to be very much forgiving, he will become infected by a vindictive mentality which spoils one's spiritual consciousness. Maunam or silence means that one should not speak on worthless or frivolous topics, but should discuss the actual issues of human life, such as going back home, back to Godhead. Remaining completely silent is a symptom of ignorance. A stone is silent due to lack of consciousness. Since every material thing has its spiritual counterpart, the Vedic Shastra contain negative and positive injunctions. Corresponding to the negative injunction against speech is the positive injunction that one should always speak about Krishna. Satatam Kirtayanto Mam. One should always speak about Supreme Personality of Godhead, glorifying His holy name, fame, pastimes, interage, and so on. In the Srimad Bhagavatam also it is stated, Shrotavya Kirtitavyascha Dhyeya Pujayascha Nityada. One should always hear about, glorify, meditate upon, and worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. In the 21st verse of this chapter, it was stated, Sabde Parecha Nisnatan. The bona fide spiritual master is expert in Sabde Pare, or the transcendental sound vibration describing the spiritual world. One cannot remain empty-headed or speechless as advocated by foolish proponents of concocted system of meditation and yoga. But one should be absorbed in the loving service of Krishna and so lovingly attracted to praising Krishna that one has not a single moment free to speak nonsense. That is the purpose of the word moment. Swadhyayam means that one should study Vedic literature according to his individual ability and also teach others. In Bhagavad Gita, it is mentioned that a Brahmana should have the qualities of Jnana and Vigyan, scripture knowledge and practical realized application of knowledge. Specifically, one should study those books which increase one's desire to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. His Divine Grace Om Vishnupad Paramhans Parivajkacharya Ashtotar Satsi Srimad Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada has written in a few short years a veritable library of transcendental knowledge. It is being practically seen throughout the world that when the principle of Swadhyayam or Vedic study is applied to these books such as Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita as it is Chaitanya Chaitamrita, and the nectar of devotion, the sincere reader becomes infused with the ecstatic determination to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The entire International Society for Krishna Consciousness is expanding all over the world on the basis of the transcendental literature. Swadhyayam does not indicate speculative or imaginary interpretation of religious scriptures, nor should one try to read many books to increase his false prestige as a so-called scholar. One should read those books which inspire practical spiritual advancement in knowledge and renunciation, as exemplified by the books of Srila Prabhupada. The word Arjavam indicates simplicity or straightforwardness. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, Swachhatam or clarity, transparency is a synonym of straightforwardness. Unless one is pure in consciousness, he will adopt many crooked means. Straightforwardness does not indicate that one should insult others in the name of honesty, but one should speak the humble truth. The word Brahmacharyam or celibacy indicates either renouncing completely the association of women or following strictly the Vedic principles of householder life, which regulate sex life for the purpose of procreating saintly children. Ahimsa indicates that one should not commit violence against any living entity. Unless one is aware of the subtle laws of karma, by which a living being enjoys and suffers, one cannot actually practice ahimsa or non-violence. Ultimately, the material world is full of violence, and the laws of nature, which impose old age, disease, and death upon every living creature, are themselves filled with violence. Therefore, if somehow or other one can convince others to surrender to Krishna and thus release himself from the violent laws of material nature, that is the perfection of ahimsa. Samatvam Dvandva Samjanayo indicates that one should keep a cool head even when distributing the material dualities, even when disturbing material dualities become manifest. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Matra sparsastu kaunteya sitosna sukha dukha agma apayano nitya stan kritiksa bharata. O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, O son of Bharat, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. Text 25, translation. One should practice meditation by constantly seeing oneself to be an eternal cognizant spirit soul and seeing the Lord to be the absolute controller of everything. To increase one's meditation, one should live in a secluded place, give up false attachment to one's home and household paraphernalia, giving up the decorations of the temporary material body. One should dress himself with scraps of cloth found in rejected places or with the bark of trees. In this way, one should learn to be satisfied in any material situation. Further, Kaivalyam or living in a secluded place indicates that a place free from material disturbances. Therefore, one should live in the association of Vaishnavas, where the common goal is advancement in Krishna consciousness. Especially in the Kali Yuga, if one tries to remain physically isolated from all, the results will be degradation or insanity. Aniketa, Aniketatam indicates that one should not be intoxicated by the ephemeral satisfaction of one's home sweet home, which will vanish at any moment by the unforeseen circumstances produced by one's previous activities. In this age, it is not actually possible to dress in tree bark in modern cities, not to wear mere scarves of cloth. Previously, human culture accommodated those practicing tapasya or penances in the interest of spiritual advancement. In this age, however, the most urgent necessity is for preaching the message of Bhagavad Gita throughout the human society. Therefore, it is recommended that Vaishnav dress with clean and neat cloth covering the body decently so that the conditioned souls will not be frightened or repulsive by the severe penances of the Vaishnavas. In the Kali Yuga, the conditioned souls are extremely attached to material sense gratification and extreme austerities are not appreciated but are instead considered abominable denials of the flesh. Of course, austerity is required for a spiritual advancement, but the practical example set by Srila Prabhupada in successfully spreading the Krishna consciousness movement was that all material things should be used to attract people to Krishna consciousness. Therefore, Vaishnavas may at times adopt ordinary dress to serve the higher principle of distributing Krishna consciousness. In any case, one should learn to be satisfied in any material situation so as to prepare for the moment of death. According to Bhagavad Gita, at the time of death, the particular consciousness we have created in this life will carry us to our future situation. Therefore, human life can be seen as a type of practice for successfully fixing one's mind on the absolute truth during the severe trials of death. Text 26. Translation. One should have firm faith that he will achieve all success in life by following those scriptures that describe the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Bhagavan. At the same time, one should avoid blaspheming other scriptures. One should rigidly control his mind, speech, and bodily activities. Always speak the truth and bring the mind and senses under full control. Purport. The definition of Shraddha or faith is given below in Chaitanya Chaitamrit Madhya Leela 22.62. श्रद्धा शब्द विश्वास कहे शुद्ध निश्चय कृष्ण भक्ति कैले सर्व कर्म कृत होय. By rendering transcendental loving service to Krishna, one automatically performs all subsidiary activities. This confident, firm faith, favorable to the discharge of devotional service, is called Shraddha. Thus, a devotee should be confident that by carrying out the injunctions of Bhagavad Shastra or Vedic literature that directly rather than indirectly describes devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one will easily achieve all knowledge and the perfection of life. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Mano Vak Kaya Dandam or strict control of the mind, speech and bodily activities means Manasa Vachika Kaika Vikarma Rahityam. That is, one should rigidly abandon all sinful activities with his mind, speech and body. As Srila Prabhupada has repeatedly pointed out, sense control does not mean stopping sensory activities, thus becoming like a dead body, but rather engaging one's mental, vocal and bodily activities in the service of Krishna. Srila Rupa Goswami has stated, Ihayasya Harer Dase Karmana Manasa Gina Nikhilasva Api Avasthasu Jivan Mukta Sauchyate. A person acting in Krishna consciousness in the service of Krishna with his body, mind and intelligence and words is a liberated person even within this material world. Although he may be engaged in many so-called material activities, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1.2.187, thus one can achieve Vikarma Rahityam or freedom from unauthorized sinful activities by engaging one's senses, mind and intelligence and speech 24 hours daily in the service of Krishna. In Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says that only those pious living entities who are Vikarma Rahita, completely free from sinful life, can achieve freedom from the illusory duality of material nature. Samatvam Dvandva Samjanayo. The Lord says, Yesam Tvantagatam Papam Jananam Punya Karmana Te Dvandva Moha Nirmukta Bhajante Mam Dridha Vrita. Person who have acted piously in previous lives and in this life, whose sinful actions are completely eradicated and who are free from the duality of delusion, engage themselves in my service with determination. Bhagavad Gita 7.2. In his purport to this work, His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada has stated, Those eligible for elevation to the transcendental position are mentioned in this verse. For those who are sinful, atheistic, foolish, and deceitful, it is very difficult to transcend the duality of desire and hate. Only those who have passed their lives in practicing the regulative principles of religion, who have acted piously and have conquered sinful reactions, can accept devotional service and gradually rise to the pure knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then gradually they can meditate in trance on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, that is the process of being situated on the spiritual platform. This elevation is possible in Krishna consciousness in the association of pure devotee who can deliver one from delusion. Srila Madhvacharya has quoted the following statement from Brahmand Puran. One should have complete faith in the transcendental literature such as Srimad Bhagavatam and other literature that directly glorifies the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One should also have faith in the Vaishnav Tantras, the original Vedas and Mahabharata, which includes Bhagavad Gita and which is considered the fifth Veda. The Vedic knowledge originally emanated from the breathing of Vishnu, and Vedic literature has been compiled in literary form by Srila Vyasdev, the incarnation of Vishnu. Therefore, Lord Vishnu should be understood to be personal speaker of all Vedic literature. There are other Vedic literature such as Kala Vidya, which give instruction in material arts and sciences. Since all such Vedic arts and sciences are ultimately intended to be used to render devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Kesava, saintly persons in the renowned order of life should never blaspheme such apparently mundane literatures, because such literatures are indirectly connected with the Supreme Lord. One may go to hell for blaspheming these secondary literatures. Shraddha indicates a faithful mentality which can be analyzed in two sections. The first type of faith is a firm conviction that all the statements of the multifarious Vedic literatures are true. In other words, the understanding that Vedic knowledge is in general is infallible is called Shraddha or faith. A second type of faith is the belief that one must personally carry out a particular injunction of Vedic literature in order to achieve his goal in life. A devotee of Supreme Lord should thus apply the first type of faith to the previous Kala Vidya or Vedic material arts and culture sciences, but he should not accept such scripture as pointing out his personal goal in life, nor should one carry out any Vedic injunctions that is contradictory to the injunctions of Vaishnava scriptures such as Pancharatra. Thus one should faithfully accept all Vedic literatures as directly or indirectly describing the Supreme Personality of Godhead and should not blaspheme any portion of it. Even for Lord Brahma as well as for other creatures down to the insignificant unmoving species such as trees and stones, blasphemy of any Vedic literature causes one to merge into the darkness of ignorance. Thus, the Suras, the demigods, great sages and devotees of the Lord should understand the Pancharatrika literatures as well as the four Vedas.
Thank you. You can stop there.
आ रहे हैं।
वो
पानी से निचोड़े छोटे बच्चों का हमें सुखा
ब्रेक इधर
जोगीनाथ कहाँ है? जोगीनाथ किधर है? जोगीनाथ आरती लीजिए, आरती ऑनलाइन।